Hi, I'm Maggie McGrath, editor of Forbes Women, and this is The Exchange. Today we are talking to two architects, one from the 30 under 30, the other from the 50 over 50. Joining me now is Diana Kellogg and Prasanna Lachagari. We're going to start with the speed exchange. Question 1, what is one trait every architect needs?
Perseverance.
Creative.
What is one habit for success in architecture?
Discipline.
Discipline and determination.
What is your favorite time period in architecture?
I don't really have one. I have my favorites from different time periods.
The contemporary era.
What is your least favorite architecture trend?
Destructive Frank-Gehry's architecture.
I'd have to say trends in general. I'm not a trend fan.
So Diana, Prasanna, you're meeting for the first time, and this is the exchange. So I would love to start by asking you to introduce yourselves to each other. Diana, I'll start with you.
So I'm Diana Kellogg. I'm an architect, as you know. My career has had lots of different permutations, let's say that. I started my own firm about 2 years after graduating from Columbia. I worked for Annabelle Seldorf, who's a female architect, obviously, which was great. And then I started my own firm and I worked in high-end residential for a really long time. And I did some community work, which I really liked. And when I was about 8 years ago, bunch of variables sort of came together. And so I went to India and was able to actually do what I'd always really wanted to do, which was more community work rather than, if you do residential, you really only affect the family or the individual that you're working with. So I wanted to have a broader reach and sort of get back to what I had sort of started in architecture school. And so I'm doing it. It's actually kind of incredible, actually, to have that. And I still remember some of the studio. I mean, I'll look at the work I'm doing and I'll see that some of the forms and some of the thoughts were actually from my studio days.
That is amazing. I love that you do community work. And I grew up in India and got my bachelor's of architecture in India. And while going to school, I was really good at architectural perspective sketching.
Oh.
So I taught many young people to draw architectural sketching and help them get into colleges in India. And so we have a test that they have to take, and I used to prep them for that so that they get the best colleges. And I moved to the States for my master's program, and I was also working with an architect at the time and helped him build the business, helped him get clients, and with that, I became a partner, and we started
Oh my gosh.
like a sister company of that in India.
Wow.
And so we became an
amazing.
international firm, and we work on both commercial and residential projects.
Mhm.
We were solely a commercial firm before,
Right.
but when COVID hit, we got a lot of calls for residential.
Yeah.
And we used to do residential for friends and family only. Now that we got calls, we just
Right.
expanded it and took the opportunity to do both.
Right.
And besides that, I'm also a UN EcoSac representative with the UN NGO.
Wow.
And we work on community projects, which I'm a big fan of. That's like all the projects I want to do more than anything else. So we're working on women housing. And
Where is that?
Currently in India.
Okay.
And the next one we probably will do is in Somaliland.
Oh, wow. So it's funny because actually, I mean, you're Indian and I'm actually sort of expanding into, I started the international work that I'm doing in India, and now it's sort of branching out to different countries. So it's kind of very interesting to compare our careers because I've actually had sort of a fresh start, later in my life. And there's a variety of reasons, which actually have, I don't know, we should talk about this, but it has to do with, raising a family and balancing personal and professional, which is just a challenge in every field. But
I was going to ask about the community aspect that you both mentioned. Is that what drew you to architecture in the first place? But then there are financial considerations that have you work on projects that you wouldn't classify as community, or how would you talk about that?
I mean, I'd probably say most architects actually are drawn to the field of architecture because that's the kind of work that they want to do. I think in general we're humanitarians, and so we do want to affect community, affect social change, and have, a voice in that arena. I was in New York City. The only work that I got was, most of the work I got that paid the bills and paid for people's salaries and rent was residential. And I did houses and apartments and lofts, and like the lofts are kind of like freestanding buildings, so there's a lot of creativity in that. But I had done some kind of nonprofit community work, something for the Jazz Foundation of America, and various other things, and I wanted to do that, but I actually couldn't because just where I was with my life and my family, I didn't have the ability to travel. I had children at home. And so, yeah, for me, it kind of, I got to sort of come to that later. And I'm jealous that you got to come to it so young. That's fantastic.
I think, like Dan said, I think it is every architect's dream to do community work, not just because of we're really nice people, not just because of that, but also I think selfishly we get to be really creative on these projects, right?
Yeah.
And like, for example, the school we're designing, so I got to introduce like classroom gardens, and like the whole class gets to maintain it and it's their identity, and I could introduce things like that and they would be all up for it, versus like a commercial school. They'd be like, this is our program,
Yeah.
this is how much profit we're going to make, so we just are very strict with space, and like, or what we are very constrained to their ideas, I think, which is not a bad thing. We could still be creative and make great buildings, but there is a satisfaction in the community work we do and how creative we can be.
You're smiling. I feel like it helps you dream more.
Yes.
It brings you back to maybe what drew you to architecture in the first place.
Yes, and also like bring in our own life experiences as like schools and housing, and like make the space work to actually be a space that you feel good about, and work towards like changing education, like how we want the education to be, versus like somebody else's idea of like education when we're designing a school.
So what first drew you to architecture?
For me, the homework of like an architecture student in 8th grade, and I was like, this is what I want to do for homework. And that's when I was like, started looking more into the architecture, and I like the idea of how art can be a transformative, like me as like as an artist growing up, like wanted to use this art as like a built form and want people to occupy it. I thought that is so cool about architecture. So that's my architecture.
Yeah. I mean, I would sort of echo that. I think the ability to actually, once I came to a place where I could see that space actually changed people's lives, whether it's just in a small way of adding an addition, a room or whatever to a home or something, it shifts the dynamics in the home, and it shifts the way people move around the home and move around the space. And I think, with the community work, you're actually really able to actually do that. I mean, I'm doing a school as well, and I'm in India, and actually, it's been very interesting to sort of have, what I've conjured in my head to actually see in reality work. It's just it's fantastic and satisfying, and just to sort of focus on something that you think is important and practical, and actually see it acting in reality, working, is just, it's fantastic. I mean, it doesn't always happen, so we we do our best. But yeah.
2 follow-up questions. One, when you talk about architecture changing lives, is there a piece of design or a project that you've done that has had a very specific impact that you can share? Is there an anecdote that comes to mind when you say something like that?
I'm doing, I built a school for girls, which is in a very rural area of India. And it's actually the location that we got. We weren't able, it was the only location it was donated. And it's in an area of the desert, which is, don't want to say unsafe for girls, but, it's vast, it's wide open. There's a lot of, things that can happen when you're alone, kind of walking through the desert or whatever, where there'd be, running into, snakes or anything like that, or people or whatever. So one of the things I really wanted to do was to create a space that was, that felt really safe, that the girls felt really comfortable in, and that the girls felt, they could be free to express themselves. And, my greatest compliment is the girls, when I went there afterwards and I was like, what do you think? And they were like, I feel free here. And that is like, just, incredible.
I have a question. Is that the circular oval school?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm a big fan of this. I used that school as a precedent for my own school. It is like, to study it, I was like so amazed by the school. It is such an incredible school. You have to look at it. It's like a circular school, and how the light comes in and it feels so protected, how it is designed. It is such a beautiful school. You look at it.
Thank
Oh
you.
my God, I had no idea that was you. I'm like so amazed.
What a funny coincidence.
We looked at photos of that school when we were talking about the 50 over 50, and the light, it does look like the light hit. And is there something with when the rain falls and that's filtered too?
Well, the rain, as you know, it's monsoon in this region. So the rain, the entire structure was meant to capture water as a rain harvesting entity. So the rain comes off of the roofs on the upper part and goes into the center courtyard and into a cistern. And we actually have enough water in our cistern to function year round. So
Wow.
it's pretty great.
So sustainable.
So yeah.
Wow, I'm still amazed on it.
This is great. This is why we wanted you to come in cold. I'll ask you the same question about functionality and design. Have you seen within your own work a small change or big change in one of your projects that has changed the way someone has lived?
Yes, I think like 2 things. The school and the women housing is like a part of the same campus you're trying to design, and we wanted to promote equality in among the children from a young age. So in India, we have a lot of religions. So we designed an interdenominational meditation space in the center where the kids get to pray in their own religion and learn to respect each other's religion from a young age. That is like one of the aspects like in the school that that brings like change from the young age. And also there's also another aspect in women housing where these women are either victims or of abuse or somebody who didn't have a home. So we're trying to house these women, and we wanted to give these women a home that they either been taken away or home they didn't have. So in India, they're like, growing up, like we are very friendly with our neighbors, like all Indian women are, because men go to work. Like culturally, men went to work in the past, and then women stay at home. And women love talking to their neighbors, and like they spend their whole day like kind of like family, like neighbors' family. And I grew up with the same culture too. When my parents are not around, my neighbors would like take care of me, and so we exchange food almost like every other day. So we're so friendly. So we brought that some of those aspects into architecture. Like we got the local architecture where like we have like platforms in front of the houses where they sit and talk. So we kind of introduce those little things, and also for these women to collectively work together on things or have a community. We also introduce like courtyards. That's also like local architecture in India, is for them to have a social life and also empower each other in different ways and help each other.
I said I had 2 follow-up questions, and you mentioned something about projects succeeding versus failing. And I'm curious, is there a percentage in terms of project proposals that you put out in the world or receive, and what gets finished?
That's interesting. There's no percentage. There's nothing really predictable in terms of architecture. I was actually referring more to kind of when you're in the design phase, you kind of know, like there's something that you feel that things have fallen into the right place. And it actually doesn't seem, it seems the design and everything, I think that's what I was saying about trends. Like the design is sort of effortless, and it can be, to me, it's just my aesthetic. It's more minimalist, and it's less kind of trend focused or sort of muscle flexing or sort of like, here I am, look at me. This is this incredible creative thing that I've done. I mean, what you were saying was just absolutely beautiful. The whole ideas of, I mean, I've thought about that actually for our schools. Like, how do you bring it, how do you make this, which is fantastic that you've done it, as to bring an equalizer to religions, and actually, because not any equalizer is the wrong word, but a knowledge of, different points of view from different religious perspectives. And what does that mean? Is because kids are, especially when you're teaching young kids, they're open. They don't have any preconceived sort of ideas. And I also think what you said about having the, front porch or whatever, it's also brilliant, because I've been asked by people to do sort of community centers in India. And one of the things that they've mentioned is that, there used to be this very strong sense of community in a lot of the communities, villages, cities, towns in India, which I feel so much that we've lost in the United States. We don't have those same kind of precedents. There's sort of the front stoop, or there's something like that, but it's just not nearly as prevalent as it is in India. It's so ingrained in the culture. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing to reinforce.
You both have founded or co-founded the firms that you work with, and I want to talk to you about the power of ownership in architecture. Why is it important to be a founder?
Well, I think for me, I'm significantly older, and the opportunities that I would have had in an architecture firm would have been very insignificant. As a woman, I would not have been actually invited to the table or the partnership. I would probably have done, they put you into doing, bathrooms and parking lots and things like that. A lot of the women are not made partners. So the only way I saw through that was to actually just start my own firm, because I just didn't see it happening for me to be equal to a man in the profession. It just doesn't happen often. That's very fortunate that you've actually found it.
Thank you. I think that like as being a partner, we could pursue or go after the projects like we would like to do. That's one thing. And also to Dan's point, I think it is also like being in a male-dominated industry. When I say male-dominated industry, I'm not just talking about architecture, but also like the other disciplines like mechanical engineers, like structural engineers, and the contractors. Like they're mostly men, and they're barely very few women contractors compared to like how many men out there are. And when you're working for a firm, and it's always like the men are the friends of like the projects in those cases. And when you own a firm, I think it does put you in a place, not quite still, but I think it does put you in a place to interact with them in more powerful ways, I think.
You're received differently, you're treated differently when you say, I'm the principal versus I'm just the representative.
Right.
Yes, that's true.
That's interesting. Now you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned the engineers and the contractors, because in any project, I imagine there are lots of constituents and you have ownership over your ideas and designs, but in practicality, how do you maintain that ownership? Is it maintaining ownership or is it being collaborative? Oh, I like that last.
Good question. How do we maintain it? I think I've developed the approach to actually share ownership as much as I can on a job site. It's actually kind of, I'm laughing because actually in the United States, I'll often, invite a cabinet maker or a plasterer or, you name it, into the conversation about the design, so that, I feel I have to sort of do that as a woman, because men can come and just say, do this, do this, do this, do this. My way that I've learned is I actually it takes a little longer in the beginning, but you have to let them have ownership also, because otherwise they won't put their all into it. And you get more from it, actually, if you give others ownership. In their own arena, right? So if they're doing the tile work or the painting or whatever, you've invited them into the conversation so that they actually will want to actually produce for you. So I would say that's actually one of the main elements. But actually, it's very interesting to sit with you, because in India, I actually worked with these brilliant stonemasons and stone carvers, and I had that approach. I actually was inviting this man who I have a great deal of respect for into the conversation, and he actually thought I was challenging him by asking questions about, let's talk about a cavity wall, for example. And I wanted him to put an airspace, which was Laurie Baker, right? Which is I was like, you've got to know this, right? It's a prominent feature, old Indian architecture. Laurie Baker's developed this cavity wall to keep the heat out, which was air as an insulation. And so I was talking to him about that, and he actually was so angry at me. He kept hanging up the phone because I was actually just trying to say, this is a commonality, this is Laurie Baker, this is a place to start this conversation. And I fortunately had gotten a wonderful woman who actually is now living here in Dubai, who volunteered, because I had no one helping me. It was just me from New York, and I made as many trips to India as I possibly could. But I eventually had this woman, Arya, who volunteered from Delhi to come and be on site and help with the translation, the interpretation, not just from a language point of view, but
from a design idea point of view. That's really interesting. What about you? How do you balance all the demands and the constituents?
In the beginning, I found it really hard. To be honest, we were working on a data center, and I was the only young woman in a room full of 15, maybe older men. It was intimidating. I would not talk in the meetings at all. I still don't talk on that particular project. I just still let my business partner talk sometimes, which is such a sad thing, to be honest. But in other projects, I think also I mentioned that because even if I have control on some projects, and I'm able to interact with other consultants, and like I said, the the labor and the people working on the project itself, like in India, it has been an easier conversation sometimes, but like some of the engineers too, like because whether they see it as like me, somebody like giving them constant work and like working with them, but some of the projects like it is like still very intimidating to be in those spaces, I think.
Yeah. Well, and inevitably, I mean, this happens, all the time. You'll be in a conversation and they will direct all their questions to whatever man is there. And it's like, wait, I'm the architect. This is the client or whatever, So it's very hard, actually. You have to kind of keep coming back to it and, in a gentle way, because it's a very delicate balance. You can't offend or push away because that's not going to get anywhere. We all have an ultimate goal, and so we all need to work together. And so you can't have, you want as little conflict as possible in a place that's fraught with conflict, because it's not easy to construction anywhere.
I think with more experience, I think maybe I'll get to a point where I'm more able to like coordinate with like even like in the projects like that. I think I think it's also just like the industry has to change. It's not just like architecture, like also like all the other disciplines. We need more women in the room so that it's more comfortable.
I mean, what is it like now? You said your firm is in Boston. What are the percentage of women that you have working for you?
Unfortunately, I'm the only woman working for my company, but we are like five people, and we had interns, like a few women working, and in India we have like women working for us, like majority, but like over here it's also like hard to find like people when we actually try to put out like, oh, we're trying to hire, and the number of applications we get are like so little, like with like women, like compared to like guys. I think that also has been the case.
So there's a pipeline problem.
There is also a pipeline problem, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's very hard to figure out, how this happens. But, all the architecture schools are 50-50. And then when you get to practice, my age, the people who, I mean, I'm surprised to hear from people, your generation so much, because, only about 5 to 10%, 5% actually practice architecture.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're just as good. I mean, they're in architecture school, we are equal. We are all behaving in like a very, equal way. And the women are just as talented as the men. There's no question. And they're just as capable. But, there's a whole variety of reasons. And some of them, I actually just gave a talk in Orissa for an International Women's Conference, which is a place in India. And I talked to a lot of the women there, and I was saying, what is it that, because it was very interesting as an American to speak to the Indian women and the women who came internationally. What is one of the reasons why you see the women drop out of the firms? And actually, this had never occurred to me, but it's actually a really simple thing, which is that in architecture school, you're encouraged to actually do something where you stay up all night and you work. And there's the teachers even sort of tell you that there's something in your brain that actually works in order to get this done. And I didn't do it. And I found that it actually was very debilitating for my process. But when women are working, they are expected actually to stay all night as well. And obviously, a lot of the women, if they have children, they can manage the daytime, but they can't stay all night and they can't stay all weekend, because if they have childcare or if they have daycare, it's just not a possibility. You have to be home. And, that's wonderful. I've raised 2 children and I adore them. But like the ultimate thing is it's my responsibility, not my husband's. So it's although he's a great husband and a great father, but it is, it always goes. I mean, there's practical things. You're breastfeeding,
There are definitely moments, I've talked to friends about this, where their husband wants to help, but literally when you're breastfeeding, and so what you're saying is the industry expects that overnight, weekend. Do you find that too? Have you talked to colleagues your own age about the pressure to just be always on and how that impacts their ability to be architects?
I think so too. I think there is, even in our firm, like the women are only able to like work until like certain time, which is like very, but we regulated that, like these are the timings, like for both men and women, and we did not differentiate that. But I found when I was like early on, when I was like interning at firms in India, they were expecting me to be there on the weekends, like in the late nights. And when I'm not able to be there, there's certain amount of frustration and like you're responsible for these things. And like, but is it that like after like work time, like am I supposed to like I wanted to, but it's just that there's also like safety reasons we want to like just go back home at a certain time. And also when I was teaching like kids like to get into architecture schools, a lot of like the parents thought like it is unsafe for like the girls' parents like thought it's unsafe for like to be in the industry, and they would call me and ask me like, oh, what do you think? Like, and I told them I never felt unsafe, but it is a difficult industry to like grow as a woman, but I did not tell them that. But I also, when they asked me about safety, I told it is a perfectly safe industry to be in, and it is fit for women as much as it is for any man. That's what I told them, and all made them comfortable that your child is in a good place and she is taking like good. She's getting into a good industry. That's that was something I think they all worried about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's legitimate because there is an element of, being unsafe on a job site.
Yeah.
It's construction. It's kind of, it's not finished. So there's holes in the floor and there's things falling from, above, and it's just part of that. I actually have a question for you
Yes.
because this is something that I've been thinking about, in India. This woman that I mentioned, she actually was working for me for school credit, and she actually mentioned at one point that she was doing, she was mainly doing site supervision because that's what was going on at the time. And actually, at one point, she spoke to one of her professors about the work she was doing that she could get credit for, and he said, you can't get credit for this. This is work in the field. And there was like an implication that women like do not do the work in the field. They need to do work in the office. They're not actually really allowed to go out into the field in India. And that distinction doesn't really happen in the United States necessarily. And I was wondering if that's true, because I've been talking to people, someone who was with the not the AI, the Indian Institute of Architects, was like adamantly saying that's absolutely not true for women.
That is not true. I think like especially in my generation and like all the female partners I had, and they all went to the site, and we made sure that they have the knowledge of the site, because you can't just work on the drawings without knowing what is going on the site. And I think it is probably like it is. I think I'm glad it's changing. That's what I would say. But also maybe it depends on the city too. Like Hyderabad is like a very global city where it's like a San Francisco of like India. People are very open-minded. But I think if you go to more rural areas where there's like nobody around, that's when probably even the family would be very concerned if you're going to a site by yourselves.
Yeah.
I want to zoom out and ask each of you if you have either a favorite project or an accomplishment that you are most proud of in your professional career?
I think the project I talked about in school
Yeah.
is my favorite because I felt like I was rethinking education. Also, like wanted to encourage like small group learning because when I was put in like a big classroom full of like 40 students, I couldn't talk like growing up. And but I cherished more in like the smaller groups. So I encouraged and I was like research because from my experience I just like, okay, is that a real thing? And I looked it up and Howard had a study about that and I was like, wow, because we have to um, like have some sort of study to like relate to it. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. And I was like, and I started to encourage that in the school and truly think about like, oh, what do like students like underprivileged children probably would need like access to good food, like how can I provide that? And we also introduced like class to teach them organic farming, like in the backs of the school we set up like a farm to teach them how to grow organic crops and then they can go back home and do that. And like things like that, I think we introduced a lot of like little things and also gave a lot of importance to like the cultural activities and encouraging them to be culturally active in different dancing and music. And India is like such a rich country for that. So I want to encourage that too. So that is my favorite project so far.
I mean, I mean, I totally am in agreement. I mean, what's better than seeing these happy children? I mean, it's because they're so open and it's like, I mean, there is an educational thought that actually all children, actually the education my children had in the United States, that all children are born gifted with, and it's actually the world that keeps closing down all of those gifts. So if you can actually provide a place where they can create and they can actually, not learn rote learning, but actually, have a more creative way of learning. And we were with this team I worked with, we were doing some of that. They were doing things like math arts, which is like origami is for geometry and things like that, which is so not the rigid, you sit in a row and you are taught math. And, so that's incredibly satisfying. And, they're just like, they're innocent and they're open and it's, there's a desire to learn. And really, I feel so strongly. It's like we can provide the environment where they feel excited to go to school and little things like she said that make such a big difference. And there's nothing more changes your life than the smile of a child.
You both have that in common. I love
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is the exchange at the 3050 Summit and we like intergenerational networking and advice sharing, I'd like to ask each of you to give the other advice. Is there anything you would impart to her in this moment?
I mean, I think what she's done already is extraordinary. I'm jealous because I wish I had sort of been able to do that. I don't know, keep going. You're doing the right thing. But speak in those meetings. That's one thing I would say. Don't be quiet. Even if they don't like it. It's, I'm actually a reticent person by nature and also didn't speak much in school and in classrooms and things like that. And, it's been later for me to sort of find my voice, and I wish I had been talking more back then. Because everybody has something of value to say.
I think with you, I'm like a big fan of her project. I don't know if I have any any advice for her at all, but in the future, if there's something that comes to me, I would love to work with you and probably bring you on a project.
We should be in touch.
There we go.
Should be in touch. And speaking of the future, I love to talk to industry experts about where they think their field is going. So we're speaking in 2025. If we were to speak next year or 5 years from now, what do you think the architecture world will be talking about or the general public will be saying about architecture? Prasanna, I'll start with you.
I think I think AI has been changing a lot of like things, but I don't think it will necessarily replace architecture in any way. But I do think like we are already starting to see VR and AI both, I think, and we will be able to see what the project or feel what the project already like looks like and feels like in advance. I think, and I'm very excited for all that technology.
That's fantastic because I'm just inching that way. I'm slower. I'm, model based and, I mean, I like to paint and sketch. I actually recently spoke at a friend's firm here in Dubai and to his office, and I actually, we're dealing with so many challenges right now in the world, and as architects, I think that, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think we have so much to give, and I don't think we're given the sort of credit, or we're not allowed a seat at the table where we should be, because I think that our training is so rigorous, and actually we're trained to be problem solvers and to bring in all of these different overlapping systems and networks and whatever to one solid building. Like you've got the engineering, you've got the structural, all the community component, the individual component, all of these different things. And we are trained to do that. And it's not easy. And I actually think that like moving forward, there's, obviously climate crisis. And I think we actually should be there to discuss and come up with solutions to city planning, like really basic things. I'm American. There's, this terrible fires in Los Angeles. And I'm wondering how many architects will be actually asked to be sort of in the arena to make sort of larger, to think about some of the larger issues like the fire. There's a not enough water, very simple things that need to be put in place before, the building. And, we're kind of considered extra, or, we're sort of frivolous. It's the rich that can afford the architects. And often, I don't know if you found this, but if you're working for a commercial firm, the dollar value, what the cost is, and they'll start just cutting things, and it's like you don't understand actually that design actually will improve your workspace, will improve the productivity. I mean, that's just an example of the people working in your office. If they're in a space where they can, where it's just a comfortable, pleasant space to be in, they produce more. So that isn't an equation, and I think has successfully been those points have not been successfully sort of put together.
I think that's a really good point. I was going to ask you guys if you felt that the general public doesn't understand architecture, and do you feel that way?
Not always. Like I always felt like people appreciated. Sometimes it's also like what you show them. Like if you show them like plans, like no matter how good of a design you do, they'll be like, I want to like maybe like we should just like place this way. I'm like, no, it's like it's actually perfect this way. You have no idea how perfect this is, but you show them a rendering and like pretty picture, and they're like, oh, this is pretty good.
Right.
I think, right?
Well, I mean, it's astonishing. Like it's sometimes very embarrassing when you're sitting and some of the smartest people I've known are actually looking at a plan and they have no ability to read it. And it's not, it's just something we're so comfortable with. We know how to read a plan. But a lot of clients actually, it's awkward. Some people get it right away. Actually, kids, I don't know if you've taught like really young kids, they get it immediately. It's insane like how intuitive they are about architecture. And then, like the point I was making about education and how it gets rid of a lot of those, the gifts, the gift to read a plan, the gift to create something. As we develop as humans, as adults, we shut down those areas, and the kids have it.
So maybe that's the advice from both of you to the next generation, or to all generations. Be like kids and absorb the projects.
Well, right. And actually go into I think one of the reasons that the indie project I did was I knew I was so out of my depth that I was like, I'm here, I'll look at it like with a child's eye, what you just said, so.
You said it better. Prasanna, Diana, thank you so much for sitting down with me and with each other. You have given us so many insights, and I hope it has been wonderful exchanging advice to each other.